What's up, metal and heavy music fans? It's Flight of Icarus again with MetalTrenches.com, and today we are ranking the albums of Ministry. And hey, if you like to be kept up to date with the best and brightest metal bands and albums from the underground and above, then stick with me by hitting that subscribe button down below. Alright, Ministry tier list. Always happy to talk some industrial metal and follow up my Skinny Puppy tier list, but let's just dive into it, shall we, with Sympathy in 1983. Now, like so many industrial acts, Ministry has its roots in synth pop and new wave, but honestly, none more probably exemplified than this album, which bears virtually no resemblance to what the band becomes later on. Al, what a long way you have come. I honestly don't know where to rank this one because for what it is, it's honestly not bad, and I'd even argue that it's better than some of the later albums, but it's also just not really even in the same ballpark stylistically. I'm going to go ahead and just put it at C tier. But next up we have Twitch in 1986. So here comes the hard left turn just 3 years later where Ministry truly becomes Ministry. A lot less focus on guitar, which becomes much more of a focal point after this album, I would say. Lots of parallels with Skinny Puppy's earlier albums, which is appropriate since Al will ultimately collab with them on Rabies. Great head-bobbing industrial beats and funky bass lines. Definitely listen with headphones too, because there's a lot of fun with toying with the sounds, kind of moving from left to right and back again. I also forgot that around this time Ministry lived in Evanston, Illinois, which was just a stone's throw from where I grew up. Very solid record, not quite as legendary status as the next few, but I'd say it gets a B from me. Speaking of which, let's talk about The Land of Rape and Honey in 1988, and just FYI regarding the title of this album, it was at the time the official motto of Tisdale, Saskatchewan, due to them producing high amounts of rapeseed and honey. So the Ministry guys saw this slogan on a mug, and thus the album title was born. But yeah, total banger. This is an industrial classic. Title track, Deity, Golden Dawn, Hezbollah is one of my personal favorites. Very consistent throughout. Song lengths feel very good. I mean, what can I say about this album that hasn't already been said? It belongs at S tier. Then we have The Mind is a Terrible Thing to Taste in 1989. One of their most recognized albums, I would say, and another classic. Thieves is a total anthem, as is Burning Inside, and I also really love Cannibal Song for something a little bit more strange and hypnotic. I do find it to be a bit uneven though, especially in the second half, and I'm not a big fan of the tedious rap of Test or Breathe's seemingly endless repetition. Songs are generally much longer than they need to be, which is honestly kind of an issue with almost the entire discography. So not quite S, I would say. I think a lot of people would put it there. I'm going to put it at A tier. But then we have Psalm 69, The Way to Succeed and the Way to Suck Eggs in 1992. For my money, this is the Ministry album I'll most recommend to new listeners. NWO is just a massive and pretty dynamic song for them too. Wall-to-wall singles. Just One Fix, Hero, Scarecrow, Psalm 69, and of course the Diggy Dag Dong of Jesus Built My Hot Rod. It's also their most successful album commercially, and so this one has got to be S tier, probably my personal favorite overall. But let's move on to Filth Pig in 1996. This album is a bit of a shift from those last few in that it is much more groove focused, almost sludgy, I would say, in places. It's basically an expansion of the ideas on Scarecrow. Personal favorites on here, title track, Reload, Lava, and The Fall. Dead Guy is kind of a banger too, sounds like a helmet riff, and allegedly the title comes from somewhere in the British Houses of Parliament calling Al a filth pig for his behavior on stage. This one lacks some focus, but I still really enjoy the atmosphere, and I'm going to put it at A tier. Alright, Dark Side of the Spoon, 1999. I remember my friend who used to drive us around in high school had this album in his car, and the cover always really amused me. Supermanic Soul is a bit of a banger. Whip and Shane and Eureka have some fun grooves to them. Kind of hypnotic again, really. Bad Blood is a solid single. Some neat additional instrumentation too on Nursing Home with the saxophone and I think a subtle banjo if I'm not going crazy. Definitely also some crap here though with the basically unlistenable step. Cafe is also kind of lame. Comparatively, I still would though give this one B tier. Like, it's pretty decent overall when you sum everything up. Alright, Animositisomina in 2003. Had to practice saying that a few times. I'm still not sure if I got it right. But anyways, Jorgensen has apparently called this his least favorite since it wasn't really fun to make while quitting heroin cold turkey. He technically, I guess, didn't even finish it, which is why Leper is an instrumental. It was supposed to have vocals on it. The production feels a little bit all over the place too. Still some decent moments on here. Animosity is a fun guitar-driven opener with the usual Ministry feel. Unsung is alright. It's not particularly good, but if you ask me, they have much worse albums. I'm going to give this one a C. Next up, Houses of the Molé in 2004. First album since Twitch to not feature Paul Barker on it. But with Mike Scaccia returning on guitar. Really stupid title, if you ask me. No W is a nice thrashy intro, though. Obvious reference to George W. Bush, who is even sampled on the track. This is the beginning of the, W administration trilogy. Lots of fun riffs across this album. Warp City even has a bit of a Motorhead vibe to it. An overall improvement from the last album, definitely, but I'd still put this one at C tier. And again, by the way, as always, these albums are also ranked within their tiers from right to left, so the closer to the letter, the higher it is. Alright, Rio Grande Blood in 2006. More fixation on the Bush administration here again, and yes, before we had Trump, we had the W. This is Jorgensen's second favorite album. It does bring back some of the vibes of the older discography, I would say, with the production and how the songs are put together. Vocals kind of fall back into the background again on a lot of this as more of a supplement along with the samples. The thrash riffs are even faster on this one too, like Senor Peligro, which is damn near a Slayer track if you ask me. Speaking of which, Tommy Victor of Prong plays on this album along with Paul Raven of Killing Joke. Then Jello Biafra of Dead Kennedys guests on Ass Clown. More on him in a bit. I would call this a solid return to form, and I'd call it a B, really close to an A, like the upper end of B tier. And then the end of this trilogy, The Last Sucker in 2007. If you are tired of hearing about Bush, Al's just not quite done yet. I did want to include this, that Al admitted in an interview with Songfacts that by the end of this album, he actually felt bad for bashing Bush, and actually, I want to read this direct quote from him. By the end of Last Sucker, I actually felt guilty and bad about bashing Bush. In Rio Grande Blood, I was all into it. This guy's evil. But by the end of Last Sucker, I was just like, this guy's in over his head. The oligarchy rules, and this guy plays with crayons and reads My Pet Goat. I mean, he's a blithering idiot. I protested him here in El Paso one time. I got within 10 feet of him, and he was at a taco stand like, I'll take one of them enchiritos. Well, there was no enchirito on the menu, and I didn't even know what an enchirito is. But George W. was insistent, so they made him an enchirito, and I got to witness the whole thing, and I started feeling sorry for him. What a dolt, man. This guy is so stupid, he can't be running the country. Cheney and the oligarchy is running the country. This guy just placed with Tonka trucks and orders enchiritos. I actually felt sorry for him. So anyways, kind of a continuation in sound of the previous album. Let's Go is a great opener, sounds perfect for kicking off a show, really, and actually I really enjoy this album. I really did. Going back and checking it out and listening to it from start to finish again, it's really good. I think besides maybe Die in a Crash, pretty consistent. I would put it at A tier, like the bottom of A tier. All right, but then we have Relapse in 2012, and this is post breakup, their first album in 5 years, and this shit is cringe. It honestly sounds more like a Dope album to me, if you're familiar with those guys. The shitty cover art, the fuck yous, Double Tap is lame, Kleptocracy and 99%ers are just embarrassing. The one positive I can give is that the guitars sound super heavy on this one. Yeah, there's been a lot of meh up to this point, but this is the first album that I straight up hated. I'm going to put this one at F tier. Then there's From Beer to Eternity in 2013. Mike Scaccia appears posthumously on this album as he passed away on stage due to a heart attack performing with his other band. So this was supposed to be their last record, yet again. The opening track is kind of weird, almost a dubstep kind of thing. This thing doesn't come at all with the aggression of the previous records. It almost feels like a remix album at times. times or a compilation. Just all over the place with tracks like Lesson Unlearned and the offbeat reggae of Thanks But No Thanks. I wouldn't call anything memorable, not even the singles. And also more shitty cover art. He said he was going for like a Seven Deadly Sins kind of thing, but it just comes off as more cringe to me. Less painful than the last album, but still not good at all. I'm going to put it at D tier. Alright, AmeriKKKant in 2018. Talk about stupid fucking titles. It's like the Statue of Liberty on the cover is me reacting to this album. I avoided this one like the plague at the time after hearing that awful Antifa single. Like, as someone who lives in Portland and sees what these morons are really like face to face, I appreciate the satirical elements, but it's just not a good song. And I can't remember who it was on Discord, but I think it was either Pair of Jeans or the Metal Meltdown, but they said this is like a crash course in how not to take complex social issues and convey them through insanely one-dimensional music. And I would agree with that sentiment. If I were to give it some praise, I do kind of like Victims of a Clown. Very infectious groove on this one that would have been right at home on Filth Pig. We're Tired of It also feels like a solid throwback to that Burning Inside kind of vibe. But other than that, it's pretty shit. I'll probably not listen to it ever again, at least not anytime soon. I'm going to also put this one a D tier. I do think it's a little bit better than the last one. And that brings us to Moral Hygiene in 2021. So, y'all, I was prepared to come in and meme on this thing and just rip it to shreds based on that awful Search of Destroy cover. But I gotta be honest here, this album surprised me, to the point where I was like, yo, did Al just troll all of us? Good Trouble is a pretty solid single, again, sort of in the vein of the Filth Pig era. In fact, I would say that's true of most of this album. Lots of really great infectious grooves. I like the harmonica on that track. The samples, I feel like, get a little bit out of hand, but overall, like, really consistent track listing for the most part. Alert level's solid. Disinformation is a real great jam. Those got me bobbing my head for sure. But really, I think that my favorite track is the Jello Biafra feature on Sabotage is Sex. Like, I didn't know that I needed another Dead Kennedys Ministry crossover, but that combo slaps. I will say that once again, the songs kind of drag on a bit too long, and so it's a little bit bloated here and there. You trim the fat on this thing, though, and it's really good. And believe it or not, ultimately, I'm going to give this album a B at kind of the upper end of that tier, too. So yeah, those are my Ministry rankings. Let me know down in the comments, as always, how would you rank these albums? What's your favorite and least favorite and why? Also stick around because I got a whole playlist of these tier lists and then also full album reviews and plenty of other content for you to check out. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.